Sister has stalked my ex's new girlfriend for 5 years, and I'm terrified her obsession may turn deadly and need help deciding whether to act. I'm 23F and I have an older sister, 25F, and lately I've been losing sleep over how worried I am about her. Everything started 5 years ago. My sister was cheated on by her long-term boyfriend with another woman, and since then she's become completely obsessed with this other woman. In the beginning, she claimed she just wanted to see if this woman got her karma, but now the obsession is so intense and sinister, it truly scares me. I'm actually thinking she could snap and get violent, maybe even dangerous, and I have no idea what to do. I keep thinking whether or not I should get our parents involved. My sister and her ex started dating in high school. Our whole family got to know him so well, we basically brought him into the family. When they stayed together after graduation, it really felt permanent. But then, 5 years ago, he cheated on her. She found out just a couple days after their 5-year anniversary. They were around 20 at that point. The girl he cheated with knew about my sister, but that didn't stop her at all from hooking up with him. My sister was completely devastated. Still, even after everything, she gave him another chance. But then, just a few weeks later, he dumped her anyway. She found out he'd never really stopped talking to the other woman, even while she was forgiving him. When all this was fresh, my sister was raging on Snapchat, putting this side chick on blast in her stories. I understood, it felt justified, and as her sister, I supported her and was disgusted with the other woman too. At the time, I just assumed she'd get over it eventually, so I stuck by her side, trying to help her move on. But after 2 years, I couldn't believe she hadn't moved on at all. She couldn't seem to let it go, even though she forgave her ex and even slept with him after the breakup. Her hatred for the other girl though, that never faded. The girl blocked my sister everywhere, but my sister always found a way to watch her, following her pages and knowing every move she made. If this woman posted herself at a restaurant, my sister would literally drive over there, eat at the same place, and make sure she walked past her table, like she was trying to make her feel guilty, ashamed, or both. My sister knew where the woman lived, knew her work schedule, and admitted she followed her around, constantly ranting to me about how much she hated her. What really unnerved me was when she started saying things like, she'd never wanted someone to be dead so badly. I got so concerned, I finally told her she needed therapy and that maybe our parents should know how this was consuming her. She shut down, completely shut me out and insisted she was joking. After that, she never brought it up again. That was 3 years ago, and I honestly thought she'd moved on. She went on a few dates, seemed to be living normally, and hadn't mentioned anything about the other woman or the old drama. I really did forget. Until last weekend. She'd asked me to take care of her new puppy while she went away for a work trip. I'm doing all my classes online this semester, so I said sure and stayed the week at her apartment, a few cities away from where I live. I'd only been there a few times since she moved. And as sisters do, I made myself at home. I slept in her bed, just like always. Normally, I sleep on the left side, but one night I was cold so I switched to the right side, closer to the heater. As soon as I laid my head down, I felt something hard inside one of her pillows. Curious, I dug around inside and found this composite notebook. There was a name on it, Anna, not her real name, but the woman from all that old drama. My whole body went cold. I hadn't thought about that woman in years, but inside the notebook was disturbing. It was like a window into my sister's obsession. She never got over any of it. This notebook, dated back to May 2024, was full of entries. She's convinced that only seeing this other woman really suffer would give her closure, that karma hasn't done its job, so she will have to do it herself. She described, in detail, flying out to the woman's new city to find out where she lived, trying to piece it together from her posts and pictures. Both times, she told everyone she was visiting a sick friend, but now I know the real reason for those trips. The pages were filled with truly unnerving things, even threats, and fantasies about watching this woman die. I couldn't believe it. And I realized that this notebook probably isn't the only one, just the most recent. When she got back from her trip, I tried to act normal but my head was spinning. I even went online to check the woman's Instagram from a burner account I made, scared that my sister might have actually done something to her, but she's alive and posting. The very fact that I could even think my sister would be capable of something so horrifying is a testament to how out of control things have gotten in her mind. Now I keep thinking, the obsession has lasted 5 years. She still can't let it go and seems so fixated on Anna's suffering as her only peace. I can't help but worry for both my sister and for Anna. I never imagined I'd feel this much fear or sympathy for the woman my sister once called her enemy, but after reading my sister's words, I know this is something serious. It feels like Anna could genuinely be in danger. But I feel trapped, too. My parents have no clue, they think my sister is over it. She has a good job, her own apartment, her own life. And I have no proof. I didn't take the notebook, I just put it back and try to forget about it, but I can't. I should have taken pictures, but at the time, I just stood there in shock. Now I don't know what to do. I'm scared for my sister's mind, but also scared for the woman she set her sights on. I feel gross for even reading it. Would I be wrong if I don't speak up about this? Should I go back and get evidence to show my parents so maybe they can help her? I'm overwhelmed and don't know what the right thing is anymore. All I know is that I'm scared and I don't trust my sister's intentions anymore. Update 1. Almost a year has passed since everything started unraveling, and so much has changed. When people urged me to tell my parents what I discovered, I finally worked up the nerve to do it. I still remember the moment I broke the news, how their faces froze in disbelief. They insisted I must have misunderstood, that there was no way my sister could be that unstable. They brushed it off as if I'd stumbled on some ancient, harmless diary, and my mother even scolded me for snooping. At that instant, regret washed over me. I pleaded with them, "Don't tell her, please." They promised to keep it between us. But just a few weeks later, everything started falling apart. Suddenly, my sister blocked me on Instagram, and my texts just bounced back with no response. That's when the truth smacked me in the face. My mom had accidentally blurted out everything to my sister the night before over the phone. My sister's reaction was ruthless. She insisted I was crazy, claimed she didn't even journal anymore, and accused me of trying to turn everyone against her. My mom just threw her hands up and said we were both being petty and needed to drop it. But my sister's choice was cut and dry. She cut off all contact. For months, it was like I didn't exist. Eventually, I had to just go on with my life, as if nothing ever happened. But then, a few months ago, everything exploded again. My sister got herself arrested. Drunk out of her mind, she showed up at her ex-boyfriend's house and tried to break in. It was all caught on his Ring camera. The slurred confessions of love, her vowing she'd never leave him alone, her kicking at his door while his wife and kids were inside. The chaos of it stunned me. Even I hadn't imagined it would go this far. When my parents finally learned about the arrest, their wall of denial crumbled. Suddenly, all they wanted was for me to repeat every word I'd read from those journals. My mom couldn't hide her devastation. She admitted she just refused to believe my sister's obsession had gone so far, but now she did. Both of them apologized to me with tears in their eyes. My sister eventually got out of jail on bond. My parents gave her a condition. If she wanted their help paying for a lawyer, they needed to see her journals first. She flat out refused, so they stuck to their guns. She ended up with a public defender. It was then, with her trial looming, that she reached out to me for help, begging me to convince my parents to pay for a proper lawyer. I told her as honestly as I could. We were all scared for her, we loved her, but she wasn't letting us help her. There was nothing left for us to do. In the end, she received 2 years of probation for her actions. After my parents refused to pay for her lawyer, she stopped talking to them too. 2 weeks ago, we learned she'd been arrested again. She'd broken her probation by moving out of state, straight to the city where the woman she'd been stalking now lives. I tried to warn the other woman, but her social media page has been set to private for months. When I shared this new development with my parents, both of them broke down in tears. Now there was a warrant out for my sister's arrest, and just last night, she was taken into custody again. I have no idea what's going to happen next. I can only hope this will finally be the wake-up call she needs to get real psychiatric help. Update 2. We found out where she was when they picked her up. Not at a bus station or a hotel like I'd imagined, but asleep in her car across the street from Anna's building, seat laid back, coat over her like a blanket. A neighbor called because the same car had been there 3 nights in a row. That's what the detective told my dad at 2 in the morning, his voice low and careful, like he was reading from a script he hates using. They towed the car and told us to come get the dog. I went straight to her old apartment to grab his toys and food bowls and pack what I could, and it felt wrong from the moment I walked in, too empty in a way that wasn't just moving out empty. The bed frame was gone, but the mattress was on the floor with no sheets, and there were little circles of tape on the walls where she'd peeled off photos. Inside the freezer was a Ziploc bag with a key in it. It had a tiny red plastic tag with numbers inked on in Sharpie. I almost laughed at how theatrical it felt until I saw the crumpled slip under the magnets on the fridge. East Side Storage, a unit in the same city where she'd been arrested. The total on the receipt showed 6 months paid in cash. This time I didn't wait. I took pictures of everything and texted the detective his card had a number on the back for after hours. He called me back before I even put my phone down and told me not to touch another thing, to leave the key where I found it and meet them at the property manager's office. We signed papers so they could take whatever was left. They wouldn't say what they were going to do with the key, just that it was helpful. He must have gone straight there because an hour later he called again, and the way he breathed before he spoke made my knees go weak. He said he couldn't share details, but they had found volumes. That was the word he used. Volumes. He asked me if I knew the name Eva, which is not Anna's name, but it's her new last name, the one she uses now. He asked if my sister had ever talked about bus routes or garage codes. He asked if she owned a wig. Maybe none of it would have landed as hard if I hadn't already found the second notebook. I didn't go looking, but the puppy was whining and pawing at the hall closet, that nervous scratching that sounds like a heartbeat if you're quiet. When I opened it, his nose went straight to the shoebox at the back. Inside were a burner phone with a dead battery, 2 Polaroids of a doorway I didn't recognize, and a small spiral not the size of the old composition book but packed tighter, angrier. Dates, times, weather. Little notes like 7:51, garage starts to open, wait for second car, and no dog on weekdays, and flower delivery, she comes down in slippers. The cover had a line written in pencil and erased and written again so hard it dug into the cardboard. I will be the lesson. Halfway through there was a page for me. I don't know if she meant for me to find it or if she was just writing to the version of me she's made up in her head, but it had my name at the top and then, "You started this when you took my side and then left me in the middle of the battlefield. People will say you did everything you could. You didn't." I felt something inside me crack in this dull, exhausted way, because even the softest version of her still blames me. We went to her arraignment the next morning. She didn't look like herself. Jail makes everyone the same color, the same shape. When they brought her out, she scanned the courtroom in one sweep and then locked on my mother like a magnet. She didn't look at me. The prosecutor asked for no bond and a psychiatric evaluation. He said there were indicators of planning and ongoing attempts to locate and monitor the victim. He said air tags, and my mother flinched so hard the whole bench wobbled. Her public defender asked for a mental health diversion program. The judge stared at my sister for a long time and said he was granting the evaluation and signing a no-contact order that covered not just Anna but Anna's husband and workplace and anyone within her immediate household. My sister laughed. She actually laughed, barely a breath, just enough to show teeth. When she finally met my eyes, it was like being looked at through glass. After the hearing, I stepped into the hallway to breathe and a woman was standing by the elevator with a crossbody bag and her hair tucked into a low bun. I knew her without the grid of 9 perfect squares around her face. It was her. I don't even know how she found out when to be here. She said my name like she was testing it for sharp edges and then, softer, asked if she could walk with me to the parking lot. In the stairwell she told me she'd gotten an email from a detective 2 days ago asking to confirm her current address. She hadn't slept since. She said the police had been to her office the night before, that they had her manager pull the security logs because a woman using a name that wasn't quite my sister's but close had picked up a visitor badge twice in the last month. She said they'd found an air tag duct taped under her car, and when the officer held it up it chirped like a tiny bird. He asked if she knew anyone in our state. She started crying in that angry, embarrassed way where you keep saying I'm sorry as if it's contagious, which is the part that broke me. She said, "We moved again in June." My mom thinks I'm dramatic. I kept telling myself I was. By the time we reached the bottom of the stairs, the detective who'd been calling my dad was waiting by the door. He handed me a property bag with the burner phone and the Polaroids I'd found and asked me to sign that I'd relinquish them voluntarily. He thanked me and then told us, me and Anna both, like we were a unit now, that in the storage unit they'd found a jacket with the logo of Anna's building and a visitor badge turned backward, the clip still attached. He said there were notebooks for every year since the breakup, and that some pages had been cut with a razor blade like she'd taken pieces she wanted to keep close. He didn't tell us everything. He didn't have to. My parents have the puppy now. My mom won't let him out of her sight. My dad is speaking to me as if sound might shatter me, every sentence beginning with my name like he's making sure I'm still there. We're not talking about lawyers anymore. We're not talking about blame. All the words feel small next to what's been happening in the dark this whole time. Tonight the detective called again and told me she's been placed on a 72-hour hold pending the evaluation. He said to expect subpoenas, that my name was in the journals and I might be asked to testify about the history and the notebook I found last year. He asked if there was anything else I hadn't told them. I told him about the line she wrote to me. He was quiet for a long time and then said, "She's writing to a world where there are only villains and lessons. We're trying to pull her back into this one. I don't know what happens next." Part of me wants to go back and burn every notebook so there is no record of the person she let herself become. Another part wants them preserved because maybe when a doctor reads them, they'll see the same little girl I did, who used to sleep with her head on my shoulder and ask me if I thought bad people were born or made. The only thing I know for sure is that I stood next to the woman my sister has spent 5 years hating, and she didn't look like an enemy. She looked tired. She looked like me. Update 3. The 72 hours stretched and then snapped. The hospital called my father on a Thursday afternoon and said the evaluator was recommending an extended hold, that she was not safe to self or others and acutely perseverative around a fixed target. They said it without adjectives like they were telling us the time. On Friday morning we were back in the same courthouse, only this time she came in wearing the soft gray of the psych unit, a paper bracelet digging into her wrist. She scanned the room again but it wasn't looking this time, it was counting. When the judge asked if she understood the no-contact order, she looked past him and said, like an answer to another question, "She changes her route on Fridays." The prosecutor stared at his notes like he'd dropped something he couldn't pick up. The judge signed the order for a 90-day commitment and told her he hoped the hospital could interrupt the loop. She smiled the polite smile she used to use on waiters when they forgot the dressing. After the hearing a security officer took me and a detective to a side room with a computer and let the footage play. The lobby camera showed a person who was not my sister until it was my sister, because she had the wrong hair but the right impatience, the slant-shouldered way of deciding that doors would open if she walked with enough purpose. The log on the screen had my name in a neat square font, misspelled by one letter, and the date I was in a different city at a dentist appointment, and I felt that small, childish shame you feel when a teacher calls on you from the wrong answer, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. She'd handed over a license sleeve with a card that was not mine and not hers, something printed on a home machine with the laminate just slightly off. The detective paused the tape and circled the corner of a jacket with his finger, the logo bright and ridiculous once you knew what you were looking at. He asked if I was willing to sign an affidavit that it wasn't me. I said yes, and my hand shook and made my name look like it did in middle school. We went back to her apartment one last time with the property manager and a pair of gloves. The puppy nosed the heater like he'd done it 100 times and looked at me like he'd been trying to tell me something I couldn't catch. The detective unscrewed the vent, and in the mouth of the duct, wrapped in a grocery bag, there was a plastic lunchbox with cartoon strawberries on it. Inside were 2 flash drives and a clipped stack of pages with the edges feathered where a razor had hesitated. The drives had names that tried to pretend they were boring, receipts_2019 and W2S, but when the tech in the cruiser previewed the folders he made a low sound and turned the screen away from the kid who was shadowing him. There were photos taken from the same angle at different times of day, a neighbor's cracked planter in the corner of every frame, and in the center a metal gate with a keypad and a person in slippers coming down the stairs with a package. There were PDFs of fake invoices from a floral company with dates highlighted in yellow, drafts of emails to a building manager using a voice that sounded like my sister trying to remember how nice people sound. In the stack of paper, a sheet with my name on top and a list of the questions I always ask when I'm nervous, as if she'd been practicing me. I met Anna for coffee because avoiding her had started to feel like letting my sister write the whole script herself. She was early, hands wrapped around a cup she'd forgotten to drink from, the sleeve dark where the steam had soaked it. She looked more like a person than the idea of one, which seems obvious until it isn't. She told me she was 12 weeks, the word small like she was testing how they felt in the air. She said they were going to move again but not far because her husband's parents lived down the street and she didn't want to leave her job. She said she hated that every decision had started to feel like choosing between different kinds of scared. I told her about the lunchbox and the affidavit and the heater vent and all the ways a person can turn ordinary things into traps. She laughed once in the middle of it, sharp and short, and then said she didn't know how to be in a world where a jacket could be evidence. When we left, I walked her to her car like I could make it less absurd, and she held my elbow on the curb like you do with strangers when you're trying to make both of you more balanced than you are. A letter came to my parents' house from the hospital addressed to me in block letters. The return address was just the name of the facility and the wing number. Inside, on notebook paper torn along a spiral, she'd written that she wanted her dog's red collar instead of the blue one because the blue one had too many birthdays on it. On the back, in lighter pencil like she'd written it first and almost erased it, there was a date circled, next Wednesday, and the line, the garage opens for cleaning at 6:30. There was no context. I sat at the kitchen table with my mother and read it aloud, and the anger that finally woke up in her looked almost like relief. We took a picture and texted it to the detective. He called within minutes and said they'd already asked the building to change the cleaning schedule in the code. He told me that sometimes they do that in treatment, write what they can't not write, and that the point of the hold is to build a fence around those reflexes long enough to teach a new one. 2 days later we had to go back to court for the permanent protective order. It felt like standing in a wind tunnel of words. Anna spoke, and it was quiet and precise and worse than if she'd cried. She said that she'd started checking under her car with a mirror on a stick, that she'd changed her email address twice and still woke up at 3 thinking she'd missed something. The judge granted the order for 10 years and told her to call if anyone even breathed wrong in her direction. My sister watched the whole thing with a calm that made everyone else look like they were acting. When they let her out, she finally turned to me, just for a second, and said, "You can stop pretending this is about safety. You want me to be the story." I didn't say anything because there was nothing to say that wasn't a lie. That night, the detective called from a number I'd started to recognize without saving. He said the hospital had approved limited phone calls and that she'd used hers to try to get the storage facility to release a duplicate key for a locker that wasn't in her name. He said they'd already seized it, that inside there were copies of the notebooks and a small stack of mailers with our address on them like she'd planned, for us to inherit the rest. He said there was also a letter to the ex, still unmailed, in which she'd written that she forgave him and that it was almost over, and then in parentheses, the part where I have to do everything. I don't know where to put any of this. My father keeps stacking legal paper on the dining table in careful piles like organization is a kind of prayer. My mother sleeps on the couch with the dog on her chest because he'll only settle if he hears a heartbeat. I keep thinking about those pages shaved out of the old journals and how some of them must have been in that lunchbox and some of them are still missing, as if there are parts of her still cached around the city like breadcrumbs. The doctor from the hospital called this morning and told us that she's talking now, that she's angry but less certain of her own math, that sometimes she says the right name. He said they're going to try a medication that slows the need to finish the thought. He said it like finish the thought is a thing you can do and not a place you can go and not come back from. When I close my eyes I keep seeing the lobby footage freeze on my name typed next to a woman who knew exactly how I hold my shoulders when I lie. She wrote, "I will be the lesson." I keep hoping that what comes next is not another lesson anyone has to learn the hard way, just a quiet, boring set of days where we are all allowed to be ordinary again. I don't know if we get that. I know that today, at 6:30, the garage door at Anna's building did not open. And for the first time in a long time, something didn't happen because we stopped it. That feels like the smallest corner of a world you can live in. Update 4. They called it a family meeting, but there were 2 security guards outside the door and a little sign taped at eye level that said no pens with caps. The psychiatrist was younger than I thought she'd be and older than me, and she kept her hands folded on a legal pad like she was babysitting her own notes. My sister looked up when we came in and then down at our mother's shoes and said, You kept the red ones, as if that meant something. The doctor said words like insight and impulse and fixation, but the thing that stuck was when she said some people think better when their thoughts are slowed down, like turning a faucet so the water doesn't overwhelm the cup. My sister snorted at that and stared at the clock for a whole minute and then asked my father if he'd brought the mail. When he told her we weren't allowed to pass her anything, she smiled and asked if I'd brought anything in my head. I said I didn't know what that meant. She said, "You always know what things mean. That's your thing." Halfway through, the doctor asked if my sister could explain in her own words what the order meant, and she did it like a student who knew the rubric. Distance, no contact, no attempts to locate or monitor, no third parties. When the doctor nodded, she added, almost bored, "It doesn't say anything about thinking," and the doctor didn't flinch, but I watched her pen move 3 tiny hash marks in the margin, like tallying rain. Afterward, in the hallway, the detective was waiting with a paper cup in the posture of someone who had been up a long time. He said they'd gotten a tip from the storage facility I didn't know existed, another unit, rented under a name that was a rearrangement of hers the way kids rearrange magnets on a fridge. He said they'd found what he called a kit, a wig that still smelled like plastic, a universal garage remote in its packaging, an envelope of printed floor plans you can get from the city if you know how to ask for public records instead of secrets. Tucked in the bottom was a folded handout from a hospital class with a cartoon stork and a date that matched the one Anna had said to me, and even though I know those things travel through the world without any of our help, it felt like being proven wrong about how private a heartbeat is. He said he'd already sent officers to the building again, that they were going to change the hardware on the loading dock door because there was a note in one of the binders that said, "Latch sticks if you push low." He looked sorry when he said binder instead of notebook, as if he'd misnamed something sacred. I got subpoenaed and sat under a set of fluorescent lights that made the table look like it had been wrapped in cellophane. The prosecutor asked me to say the things out loud that I had only ever written in texts or handed over in bags with property stickers. I said them. He asked if I believed my sister would follow an order she disagreed with. I said I believed my sister believed that orders were for other people. When I walked out, my mother was in the hallway holding the dog like a toddler. We took him to the park afterward and he didn't run, he just stayed at my knee and looked up every 4 steps like he was asking permission from the air. Anna met me at a coffee shop with a back door and the kind of exit sign that stays on even when the power goes out. She was wearing a sweatshirt with her husband's college printed across it like she'd put on a costume that said ordinary. She had a printout from the detective with a list of simple things to do that make people feel safer. Vary routes, keep a log, tell your neighbors. She told me their building replaced the keypad and that now you have to show your face to a camera that blinks before it opens. She said sometimes she stares into it too long because she wants it to memorize what she looks like tired. She told me she'd heard the heartbeat again and that it sounded like sneakers on a gym floor, that stupid squeak that always made her laugh when she was a kid. I didn't tell her that I had started counting my own pulse when I couldn't sleep, tapping my temple with 2 fingers until I could match it to the dog's breath. The hospital let her call me. It came through as a number with a recorded voice that said this is a call from a patient and then a pause that felt like a decision. She didn't say hello. She asked if I remembered the day in 5th grade when I came home with a permission slip and put it under her pillow because I didn't want mom to say no to the field trip. I said yes. She said, "You were better then," and then, softer, like she might drop it, "There's a drawer in the old buffet." I told the detective about the drawer and he met us at our parents' house with gloves in his pocket. In the bottom of the drawer, under the loose silverware tray, there were 3 library cards and a clean white envelope with a flap tucked in. Inside was a paper key card with a logo I recognized from a hotel chain and a post-it with a date that had already passed. He said the card had already been deactivated, that sometimes they leave them accidentally when they clean rooms. He took everything and thanked my mother for letting him go through her spoons. Then he stood in our entryway and told us, gently, that the hospital had recommended petitioning for medication over objection, that if the judge approved it, they would start something that might make her look a little different for a while, slower around the eyes. My mother nodded like someone agreeing to have a tree cut down because it leans the wrong way. The next letter came with no return address. She had drawn a little square in the corner where one would be and written from the loop. Inside was a single line that said, "I don't need the garage anymore. The loading dock door is enough." The detective had already changed it, but I still took a picture and sent it because the ritual of it is now part of how we sleep. He replied to both of us this time, me and Anna, with a message that said the door was replaced that morning, new badge reader, new hinge, no more stick. He added a thumbs up that looked almost embarrassed on a police phone. There was a hearing about medication. The judge asked the doctor to describe capacity, and she said my sister could recite the rules but not keep them in a room long enough to sit with them. My sister asked the judge if she was allowed to disagree with how a word felt, and then she asked him if he knew what it was like to be right for this long without anyone else noticing. He granted the petition. On the second day after they started, she called and her voice moved like someone walking down a hall with new shoes. She said she was tired and then she said, "I don't want the red collar anymore," like that was a correction she needed to file. She asked me if I could bring the dog to the visitor window. We stood on 2 sides of glass while he made little whines and pressed his nose to his reflection. She didn't wave. She stared at his collar and then at the bracelet on her own wrist and then at my face like she was matching colors. She said, out of nowhere, The jacket was too small, and the staff member by the door looked up like she'd just heard a fire alarm. When we left, the detective was waiting in the parking lot, again, as if he had learned our rhythms. He said there was an email they wanted to show me because my name was on it. It was from a florist, a reply to a message that had been sent months ago from an account with my misspelled name, asking about a corporate discount for regular deliveries to a specific office. The florist had written back cheerfully about minimums and Mondays and how they could put the recipient's name in the system, so future drivers didn't have to sign in. The email had never been followed up. He said this is the thing that keeps happening, that their case is made of all these small ways in, the doors that weren't marked as doors until someone walks through them. In the afternoon, Anna texted me a picture of a new door handle on a loading dock that looked like every other handle if you didn't know what you were looking at. She wrote, I keep thinking I should send a thank you note to the Hinge, and then, I made it to my second trimester appointment because people who don't know me did their jobs. I sat in my parents' kitchen and watched my father feed the dog one kibble at a time like patience could be poured. There are still missing pages. The detective thinks some of them were given away, mailed, left in places like seeds that don't need water to take root. He told me they'd found an envelope addressed to the ex with our return address on it at the storage facility's outgoing box, stamped but not sent, the kind of stamp you buy at a grocery store at 2 a.m. He said it contained a photograph of a brick wall and a hand-drawn X and, on the back, the sentence almost over. He said they think almost over means the part where she didn't have to think about anything else. The doctor called today and said the medication is doing the thing it does when it works, that she's quieter, that sometimes when she starts to build the old thought she looks away from it, that she cried for the dog and then asked if the red collar had a bell because she hated the sound in the night. He said insight doesn't arrive like a sunrise, it comes from the side like a streetlight through blinds, and sometimes people don't like the way it makes the room look. He said we should be ready for her to be angry at the light. Tonight I stood outside with the dog and listened to the steady machinery noises of our neighborhood, the HVAC units taking turns, a car door test clicked twice, a train 2 miles away saying what trains say. For the first time in a long time, there wasn't a new sound I had to learn. Anna texted me a video from her living room. Her husband had put painter's tape on the floor like a little runway to the door and written on it in marker, exit, exit, exit. She said they were leaving it there until it made their feet memorize leaving. I watched it 3 times and then put my phone face down and let the dog fall asleep with his ear over my ankle like a paperweight. There will be another hearing. There will be more paper. There will be days where what didn't happen will be the only good news. But tonight, our door locks caught the light and did what they were built to do, and no one was a lesson. Not yet.